link image. Skip heading level. Douglas Katz edit the blind blogger map can't restart button. Pause button. End stream button.
Okay, it says we're live. Are we live?
We are live. I'm sorry, I totally missed that. My wife is at an appointment with her dad right now, and she just texted me, and I had to text her back to say, "Don't call me. I'm on a podcast." So yes, we are live.
All right, it happens. Accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities. It makes the world better for everyone, online as well as in person. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the blind blogger Maxwell Ivy, and this is another episode of the Accessibility Advantage, where my goal is to advocate for more inclusion of people with disabilities by emphasizing the many positive benefits of improving accessibility. And I think that going forward, I'm just going to get used to rocky starts to my podcast interviews that lead to wonderful conversations that will educate and motivate y'all. If you want to reach out to somebody who has been an accessibility champion for almost 2 decades and get my knowledge and experience to help you improve accessibility with your organization, then please visit theaccessibilityadvantage.com or send an email to maxwell@theaccessibilityadvantage.com. I'm available to work as a writer, speaker, consultant, or podcaster to help your organization leverage the disability community. So today, I'm speaking with Douglas Katz. Doug is a West Point graduate, a disabled military veteran, and a lifelong athlete who has turned to being an entrepreneur. His career has featured resilience, innovation, and a commitment to improving and empowering independence through creating better tools. And you can find his current product and connect with him further at the website for his wonderful knife, the NULU knife, which he developed to allow people with disabilities to be safer and more confident when using a knife, but he's finding a lot more uses and a lot more people are benefiting from it. You can reach him at tinyurl.com/NULU-the blind blogger. That is an affiliate link. I have been impressed with Doug to the point that I really want to see more people find out about his knife and about the other products he's working on with fellow entrepreneurs who have a disability or who are focused on improving the lives of people with disabilities. So, Doug, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Max. And let me say, you are our first vision impaired affiliate. We're super excited to have you on board. More feedback than we expected from the vision impaired community, actually, because we were kind of like, we're afraid, why would we even think of putting a knife in somebody who's vision impaired hands? Like, there's a huge amount of liability. And what we learned was people with vision impairment have to cut things too. And the control has gotten some great things. So we're super excited to have you join in the NULU crew, man.
Well, I'm really interested in it. I feel like we're both going to be surprised by just how many people with vision loss are going to be interested in having these knives in their kitchens and using them. And maybe even will help some people return to passion for cooking and preparing food in a way they haven't without being exposed to your knife. And I'm also going to be interested to see what the instructors in the various schools for the blind think of the knife. So I'm looking forward to it as well. Why don't we go backwards just a little bit and have you tell people about your life before your own experience with disability, and then how that led to the creation of the knife and to some of the other projects you're working on.
Absolutely. So I think I had a pretty typical eventful life, right? I was in the military, did a lot of athletics. So for me, it was less an event than continued wear and tear that created an event. And, I aside from being in the Army, if you include West Point's 9 years, And then during that time, playing rugby, doing martial arts, it just eventually you evolve into disability. Like you wore things out by being active. And so for me, about 2.5 years ago, stuff just really started to give out. So a lot of upper body issues. I had issues with arthritis, carpal tunnel, and tendonitis, which are pretty common ones. And then the entire shoulder went. I got the whole Megillah. I got the rotator cuff, labrum, bicep, and all of that. But in the time leading up to the surgery, and even now, I have some lingering issues. I couldn't swing a hammer. I'm a novice knifesmith. I wish I was a better knifesmith than an inventor, but the invention, the innovation paid off when I was having a particularly bad issue. I do love to cook, as you talked about. I think it's really essential to health and well-being, not only in what you're putting in your body, but what you are, the control that it has and the value that the self-value that you have in being able to decide what you're going to eat and prepare it. So I couldn't make a traditional knife, and I had some really cool just scrap metal sitting around. I'm like any hobbyist. I don't throw anything away, which is a point of contention with my wife as well. But she doesn't feel that way when she sees the NULU as much, because I had a circular saw blade, and I had been playing around with some circular designs in the past, but I decided to really figure out why it works, and it's just a different cutting geometry. So took an old circular saw blade and came up with a very crude prototype, just to see if it worked, and built an amazing team around it. But I think a lot of it was, I think the hindsight of age is a really strong thing. And for me, I probably could have solved these problems when I was younger, but I am like a lot of people, where you don't solve a problem until it's a problem, until it's an aspirin and not a vitamin. And not being able to prepare my own food became a pain point where I needed an aspirin to be able to continue to do it. But I think it's also, a type of thinking. It's like the actor that becomes famous overnight, but has built a career over 30 years, but just becomes famous overnight. Like, I think there were a lot of things that contributed to wanting or finding that this is where I belonged in terms of optimization of utility, which, as you were talking in the beginning, good cutting is good cutting. Adaptive design is because it's the aspirin for the people who need it. And then once we establish that, then the ability to transfer over to the other world of people who understand that it's the vitamin preventing the aspirin. So we're finding interest in the homesteading market, in the commercial market, where people do a lot of cutting, and they understand it. So, it's interesting, and I have terrible ADD too, but unfortunately that doesn't count as a disability. But your original question of like how I got here, it was a very linear path in my life until I decided to try and not steer as much as I had in the past, and allow sort of the ability to tune into frequencies and let people to help and things like that. And I think that's been what's gotten me here, is to say I have to stop fighting and staying in industries where I can be successful, but it's not where I feel I'm making an impact. And I think as I've aged and gotten over 50, I want to have an impact. So I think all that coming together got me to where I am now. It's like, and this is where I'm going to date myself. So if you've got older listeners, good. I feel like the guy, I remember when I was younger and there were newspapers, and I would have the family circus, and the kid would go on his way home, and he would walk, it could be straight line distance. It'd be like 3 blocks, but he would walk all over the place, and go swing on a swing set, and then, end up at home after the circuitous route. And I feel like that's been a lot of my career, but I figure hopefully I got another, 40 good years left in me.
So one thing that we started with that is really important is how your experience shows that through age and through repetition and through continual injury that we do to our bodies just living life on a daily basis, that anyone can become disabled either temporarily or permanently. And that seems to have been the beginning of your work as far as figuring out this knife.
You know, I definitely put the knife before the sheath instead. I'll say that instead of the cart before the horse on this, because
Oh
I
yeah.
invented it for me, right? So in many ways, when you're solving your own problem, you don't do the analytics that you may need to in other situations. And I think really what happened was I invented it. I found my first partner who I had known for decades, but he's a designer and just immensely talented. And just I'd forgotten what he did. He saw me. I brought the knife to a mutual friend's house, and he got on board with it. And as we were developing this, I did go through one accelerator, a military one that's fantastic. If you have any military disabled listeners, it used to be called Bunker Labs. Now it's called IVMF. Is a great program. But what we figured was, okay, now that we figured out that it works, how big is the market, right? We didn't know if we were going to have to get investment. And what we figured was, okay, and this actually goes back to my Army days, is I have come to the belief that there is no blanket disability. You know, unless you are completely incapacitated mentally and physically, there is no complete disability. There is ability as it defines to a certain set of tasks under a certain set of conditions and standards. And that's how the Army looks at things. The Army looks and says, today you're going to learn how to stop a sucking chest wound. And here's the task and conditions and standards. And if you do all these, you pass. And it's a very good way to do things. So we started to look and go, well, cutting, there isn't disability. You know, people who have either less ability, because I don't even like to talk about disability, you know, ultimately they're, especially with a product like ours that is a simple product, there's a confluence and a combination of challenge that people have with a particular set of tasks. Let's say it's cutting. And originally, when we hadn't really explored the sight impaired, it was really body, you know, upper body impaired. And what we realized was it. Oh, did I lose you? Hold on.
Well, I'm still here.
Okay. Oh, my screen went blank. What we realized was that everybody gets there. Nature wins. Mother Nature wins. Father Time wins. I actually have a tattoo that I got on my 25th wedding anniversary that was Father Time and Mother Nature, because I think they're immutable forces. And unfortunately, they're forces that are not particularly kind to your physicality, less so to your mental faculties, but it catches up there too. So what we figured out was people will exist on what we call an ability curve. And if you're truly looking at a task, then children are functionally disabled for certain tasks. And I think we would all agree that you wouldn't put a knife in the hand of a certain child because it's not appropriate. Well, you're not saying it's appropriate, you're saying their abilities, both mental to assess risk and physically use it, do not match this tool and the task. Therefore, they're not able to do it. Sounds like disabled to me in many ways, right? Ultimately, just because they're able-bodied for their age doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at tasks from a global, universal perspective. Because when you do that, then that's when the secret sauce happens, where you look and say, what can I do then to make that task easier? And I think when we figured out that age wins, and that when you take the the traditional group that people think of as disabled, where there's the obviousness of either a congenital issue or an injury or something that's very obvious, people think of that as disabled. But if they have a bad bout with tennis elbow, they don't consider themselves disabled. They can't use a knife. They can't do what they said they're going to do, but because it's temporary, right? That's how they look at things. So by us coming up with a scale of 0 to 10, you can take any task and look at it from the symptomatic manifestation of whatever's going on at that time and determine whether people are, what level of ability they're on. And what's really interesting is when you really look at it, we are more likely at some degree, at some degraded form of ability in our life than fully able to do anything. Because injuries, age, all the stuff that we're talking about. So what we were able to figure out is it's a much bigger population. I think we ended up somewhere, if you take age-related issues and just injuries and all that, the people who could benefit from a product like NULU are like 114 million people. And I actually got into a debate with a mentor at one point where they're like, well, that number's too big. I said, prove me wrong. There's information on emergency room visits, the injuries that people have. There's definitely great information on both congenital and age-related issues. So it's a big number. And I think for me, I think what the thing that was the transformative aspect is having these issues, being at a certain point in my life, and through the blessings that I've had, having a immensely powerful network of people that I could build a great team with, and hopefully gain exposure to be able to make this more of a trend. Because as we're talking about age extension and technology and everything, extending people's lifespans and making the lifespan of people who have had, I think, like, you look at Down syndrome, the degree that these young people then grow into, sometimes adults, like well into their 40s and 50s, where that did not used to be the case. The need for an ability to make the simple changes that have big impact becomes much, much bigger. So I think if we're successful, where I would like to be is find more of that innovation in that world, like you were when you were introducing me, because people with issues, human beings, are immensely adaptable and immensely innovative, and will come up with stuff. I'm blown away consistently at the disabled space, where the innovation to solve problems with very, very basic solutions. And as an entrepreneur, I think basic solution means inexpensive parts kit, where then you can have really, really good products that are created like I did by the people who use them. And I'll tell you, sure enough, many of them will become good products for a more mainstream environment. Because, again, just because someone can use a regular knife in the case of NULU doesn't mean that they're cutting efficiently. It means that they are connected to a paradigm of what a knife should look like, and a paradigm of I'm not disabled, so I don't need a special knife. And they're creating a like, when you have two magnets and they come together on one side and the polarity will push them apart. They're pushing the same poles together and creating a repulsion, as opposed to looking and saying, well, wait a minute, this is just good design.
Right. So first, I want to get back to what you said about your math saying 114 million. And I'm assuming we're talking about just in the U.S. with that number.
Yep.
And that number is much larger than the standard numbers given out by people in the disability community. And I know exactly why that is, because when we talk about there being 1 in 6 people in the world having a disability, in general, people that are living with challenges of aging or with a trauma-based injury don't always see themselves as disabled. So I'm guessing that.
I mean, like, look at it. They call it age in place, right?
Yes.
So the issue is we try to label things different because our how we feel about it, as opposed to really solving the problem, right? It's almost the when you think of U.S. clothes sizes, they're wrong, right? Ultimately, if you go to another country and you try on the same clothes, they don't fit the same way, because U.S. clothing manufacturers know that many of us are overweight, and therefore a size 5 in the U.S. and a size 5 other places. I think people fool themselves, right? So they say, well, I'm going to create a place that is age in place appropriate. Well, guess what? If you took age in place appropriate, put it side by side with a house built for somebody who isn't senior but has problems, you're going to see the same stuff in both of them. But for some reason, we don't like to define it that way.
Well, it's an identity problem. There are millions of people who don't want to see themselves that way. But as an advocate for myself and as an inventor and the supporter of inventors for yourself, it's important to know that the real size of the community that can benefit from improvements in accessible tools and devices is probably twice what the majority of people think and say it is. Would you agree with that?
I would say at least. And the other thing that chaps my behind on that is I kind of put it in the category of when people don't give blood, or when people are not an organ donor but are expecting that someone else will have, right? If they need a kidney or they need a blood transfusion, they expect blood to be there but don't necessarily donate themselves. And I look at that, and that's when it gets really frustrating, because with what you're saying, when you say that it's double or more, the only reason that there's a miscategorization or a miscalculation, or however you want to define it, is because people don't want to accept a situation, and acceptance is the first time. That's how you're going to get better with this stuff. And I get some disabilities you can't get better, but you can get more active. And the funny thing is, while you were talking and while we've been going through this, nobody wants to be considered disabled till they want to use a disabled parking space, right? Or stuff like that. And then they're perfectly happy using their grandfather's placard, right? So it's a very interesting phenomenon.
Right.
And a world where people. Oh, good. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Now, I also want to focus back in a little bit on what you called the disability, or let's say the life challenges curve, because I feel like it's also something that we need to make clearer to people, that what you're saying is that at some point in everybody's life, they're going to be able or disabled, and they may go back and forth more than once in a lifetime based on the skill they're trying to perform and the tools required to perform that skill. Is that correct?
100%. 100%.
Yes. And since we know, or we should, since you're helping us understand this curve idea, then really people who consider themselves able-bodied at this time should be supporting the people who are doing the work to invent the tools. I mean, they should encourage them, advise them, invest in them, because at some point in their life, and it may be tomorrow, it may be 40 years, when they're in their 80s, they're going to need stuff like the NULU.
100%. And it also creates a virtuous cycle of innovation in that area, where last week, as an example, I talked about the homesteading space. There's a gentleman who I've gotten connected with through the West Point community, who is a realtor who does like homesteading and helps people do homesteading. So he was running an event and just joined as an affiliate. We got him a NULU, and it got great. I think his wife was doing an event where they were preparing kimchi, of all things, a lot of cutting. It got great reviews through people who probably, maybe there were some with, tennis elbow, maybe pickleball elbow now, or whatever. But fundamentally, yeah. And I think that when people then understand, well, wait a minute, it goes back to the vitamin and the aspirin. The people who need this use it. Why do they use it? Why do they like it? Well, it's efficient cutting, where they are unable to cut without this efficiency, or there's an element of control to know where the blade is in the case of the vision impaired community. And when you look at that and go, okay, well, control, that's good. If I can see, control is still good. Efficiency, well, that's good if I'm doing a lot of cutting for a day. The homesteading friend of mine was talking about the canning season and how much cutting they do. Well, they don't care what that knife looks like. They just don't want to be sore at the end of the day. And so I think that it really comes down to in many ways, when you hear about innovation in the tech world, the brass ring is the military civilian carryover, right? So I have friends who've gone into that world, and they'll develop technology in the military space where there's a high degree of government investment, and then they can take what they learned in many times and apply it to the business to consumer place, which is not unlike NASA, right? Like things like Kevlar and Silly Putty, like all these interesting things came from stuff like the space program. I
Right.
think there's an ability to do that in the adaptive space. There's an ability to look and say, okay, we have a need here, and we have a market that is small but loyal and vocal and gives great feedback and all of that in the disabled space, where you can do the development and then roll out other products that might have more mainstream appeal, and then continue to rinse and repeat, because again, people are going to end up there. I'm finding sort of the sweet spot for the carryover market, or that inflection point, is 40s and 50s, right? Where you've got many sandwich generation who are taking care of a loved one, and may look and say, oh, I'm going to get this for mom or dad so that they can continue to cut even if they're living with you. But also in your 40 to 50, you're starting to feel your own issues. So I think that's sort of the really, and you may have kids too, as we're looking at the kids market. I think that's the market that sort of gets what you're talking about, where they look and they're looking in the mirror with their parents, and they're looking back at their kids who may be in a cast because they've broken an arm or some kind of stuff, and they can really see the whole forest at that point. So I think that's going to be a really, really big market for us.
Right. The other thing that, and I'm glad you mentioned it without me having to ask about it, the whole idea that the disability market is small, but they're powerful, they're loyal, and they can affect other purchasers and other decision makers outside of the disability community. That's one of those things I believe in wholeheartedly, and it's great to hear a guest mention that as well without me having to ask them. But
Heck no, I mean, I have been blown away, and part of the reason why we're trying to keep our mission in this space is because the disabled market is a market that many people would kill for, because I've had people go, can you make this? And they'll describe something to put like lotion on their body or whatever, and you look and you're like, wow, you're coming up with a great idea that you're giving me to maybe commercialize. Like, that's, where do you never get that. Everybody wants to keep the ideas themselves, but for many, um, there's such a need that that they're open with their feedback. But also the frustrating thing I see with that is there's also very little belief that they'll be able to commercialize it. And as I said earlier, my ability to have access to capital and to have had a previous career and build a network and a lot of other things uniquely set me up to do this. And I'm really realizing that more and more every day, where when you look at, generally someone with a disability, especially one that they've had a long time, they're trying to get by. They're trying to exist in a world that doesn't really, that while better than it has been in the past, is not engineered for them in any way, right? Physically,
yes.
but also entrepreneurially. And I think that one of the things that we would really like to do, my parent company, where I've got NULU as part of a bigger push, we need to get it to market first and need to prove out the success. But I would love to find more disabled entrepreneurs that need mentorship and access to capital and all the kind of things that I had, and be able to do that. Now, on the military side, I wish more disabled military veterans would pursue this kind of thing, because there are existing infrastructure. But I also have to think that for accelerators out there, many times they have scholarships and things. And there is an ability out there. And the thing that the disabled space has that other people don't always, and this is a huge part in business today, is a great narrative, a great story. More than ever, I am seeing people connect with NULU because they connect with what I've done to get there, right? If it's just this inanimate object, it's not there. But the whole story is many times what draws people in. It allows them to make a connection. And the disabled community, there's more and more disabled bloggers like you out there that are telling stories, which is amazing because heretofore, no one did that. And as a result, there was less of an ability to organize and do all that kind of stuff. But I think as more and more of this happens, hopefully there can be more and more innovation, commercialization, and success in the disabled community. Because what I see if that happens is the amazing thing, and it's very similar to the female, like, capital markets, right? There's a lot of women who've been successful who create venture capital or private equity firms really specifically focused on helping other female entrepreneurs. You see the same thing in some of the disadvantaged racial and other communities, but you don't see that in the disabled community. And I hope that maybe we'll be thought leaders in that area, because the other part is you guys work hard. You know, the degree of everything involved in what it would take to be successful as an entrepreneur is there. Just nobody's figured out yet the advantage that you guys bring.
No, partly because a lot of the advantages we bring are not easily quantifiable. But I appreciate you pointing that out, that there are more of us telling stories through, telling our own stories or helping other people tell stories through blogging and podcasting, like my show.
Yeah.
Also, just how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur who has a disability because of the lack of quality tools and the amount of extra effort it takes to accomplish everything that goes into being an entrepreneur. That's really important. And I appreciate you recognizing these things, because I feel like an improvement in empathy would be a good start as far as finding ways for more people to be helped with their entrepreneurial side of their inventive natures. So I want to talk a little bit more about your wanting to help others, and also about the benefits beyond the disabled person that the knife or other products may be invented for. But first, I want to remind people that this is the Accessibility Advantage, and you can find me in the podcast at theaccessibilityadvantage.com, and that I will have a link to Doug's LinkedIn profile, which you can find the knife and more about his company at tinyurl.com/Nulu-the blind blogger, which is an affiliate link. And I do hope y'all will check that out and consider it. So as I was hearing you talk about the knife and how it helps homesteaders and people who have to do a lot of fine chopping, I'm thinking that this knife could not only help people beyond the disability community, but your knife could actually transform a profession. Because I think about all those people in the restaurant industry, people who spend hours daily chopping meat, vegetables, etc., whose careers could be extended or whose quality of life would be improved if something like this were adopted. And that's a whole community that very few of have a disability.
100%. And I think the issue is, like, the knife is a very visceral thing, right? We're very connected with it. It's one of the first tools we invented. And as a result, it was a consummate multitasker in the beginning. You had to be able to stab and cut. It was what, if you were going to survive, you needed something that could do all that. You don't need a point in the kitchen. You don't need a tip. You're not stabbing anything. That is the transformative part. And you're 100% right in that it can extend a career. I a lot of times what I focus in on, and I've gotten more adept at having discussions with chefs, and they'll look and they'll say, why should I try your knife? It took me X amount of time, whatever time, to learn knife technique. My answer is the best tool that you could have requires no technique. If you're really using a tool, it should be an extension of your body. So if you look at different designs of, weapons, like if you look at the blade, the rapier was designed perfectly for stabbing. It aligns for your body. It was functionally designed for what it was for. And you had to, you learn technique, and it's the same thing with a knife. But when you look and you go, okay, well, wow, that design is perfect for like stabbing. If you look at fencers, how they fight. But when you don't need that anymore, now you're wasting what the main alignment is that linear design, sort of in line with your arm to the point, so that all of your force goes into whatever you're doing with the tip of that knife. Creates a lot of issues when you're cutting. So now, when you're more of a circular design, where the force transference is now to the cutting blade instead of the tip, that really changes things. Now, with that, you don't need technique. In fact, the challenge I have with this is people say, how do you use it? How do you want to use it? Right? Like, ultimately, we say it's the knife that adapts to you. We have some guidelines, some recommended uses, but a truly transformative tool does not require you, aside from safety issues, to engage it a certain way. And not only do we see some transformation in the culinary world, where yes, people can extend their careers, we feel it can increase productivity for sure, to
Yes.
where an able-bodied person could, and I hate that term, could gain a 10 to 15% productivity increase because they're not having to switch knives. It's a more direct cut. They're not getting tired. But the interesting thing is, on the commercial side, we're also looking at from the employer perspective. And before I go to that, though, the other part, when you're saying transforming the food prep individual, what we hope is it can open the world for people to have careers who otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And with that, I do talk about people who have maybe dealt with a disability more over a lifespan, and look and say, wow, I would love to be a chef or be in the food preparation industry, but I can't. That shouldn't be. So I do hope that can extend that. But what that means is a couple of things. It means for employers, you've now increased your employee pool, and we're going to be seeing a shortage of people in the culinary industry very, very soon, as they're all deported. And that's just a fact. So other people can move into those roles. And if those are disabled people who would love the opportunity to have a job, well, great. Then we want employers to be able to look and say, wow, now I can hire these people who I wanted to in the past. But the other part is for all of their employees. If it's a better cutting tool, workman's comp claims drop, absenteeism, workplace injuries, all those things drop. We were really trying to initially engage that market with like ADA compliance and some of the other things that generally emerge as reasons why an employer would make a different choice for maybe a more expensive tool. Where I would love to get to at this point, and I just got to find the right people, is the insurance industry is going to be at some point motivated, I would think, to decrease workman's comp claims. Well, if I can get there, or an ability where they say, okay, this is a better knife, and if people use it, they're less likely injuries, and as a result, we'll support that. This helps that virtuous circle, right? When I was talking about a disabled approach that then can become mainstream, well, if we can transform the world of cutting in the commercial space for a large number of the organizations that do that, that's proof of concept that we can continue to improve product for one space and then blow it out of the water with others. And I think that gains momentum. People look at, and capital providers look and say, we like what these guys are doing and all that. But who knows? Maybe we won't have to. Maybe we'll be in a situation where we're able to self-sustain. But yeah, I think it could be transformative in the culinary space, and that's just one of them. I think if you think of how basic using a knife is, there are endless ways that all this thinking can be applied.
Right. And so if y'all were following along here, we started with a knife that was made so that somebody with a disability or somebody with physical challenges, maybe somebody aging, could cut safely and feel the satisfaction of preparing food and also the necessity. But then we've got something that can go so far beyond that, and this doesn't just wouldn't just be the case for a knife. I mean, we have something here that could affect the insurance industry by them applying it to businesses that are in the culinary fields. We have quality of life, absenteeism. We have people being able to enter the workforce that currently can't enter the workforce. A friend of mine likes to use the example of throwing a rock on a pond. So basically, y'all threw this rock in the pond, and the more we talk, because this is the second time we've talked, the more we talk, the more potential impact we can both see on the society and on the world of business. And really, at this point, it's just a matter of continuing to grow your network that you've mentioned before, so that you can reach the instructors in the culinary fields who will encourage their students to use your knife, so that you can reach the insurance providers who will pressure the large corporations to adopt it and have their employees use it, and just continue to follow that through. So I'm really it's just really validation for what I and many people have been saying all along, which is accessibility isn't just for the disabled people. So,
Well, and again, this is where and what resonates, and when we had our earlier conversation, and now the whole concept of getting away from the identity politics of disability and really boiling it down to the essence of what it is, and it truly is about tasks. Now, some people have a wider array of tasks that they would have challenges with, and that's okay. But when you start to look at it as what are the major tasks that somebody needs to do during a day, and you start to approach it in subordinate problems, as opposed to this person's disabled, how do you approach accessibility? Well, what does that mean? And I think for us, really the opening, and I would say it's a validation more than anything, is we started with this for upper body. I was very much in myself. Okay, I have carpal tunnel, arthritis, all the things I talked about before, and it helps me. So it's an upper body tool. And that's the way we were going for a long time. And then I did an abilities expo, and I think I sold 27 knives, I think. And I think 2 or 3 were upper body. We sold 3 to vision impaired people. There were people who had upper body aspects, like maybe grip. But many of them were seated, where they had to be in a wheelchair. And what was super interesting about that was it was like, oh, well, wait a minute. You lose all your leverage and stuff. So then we really started putting our heads together and going, okay, we have this all wrong. We really have to now think about what we figured out with upper body and go, okay, we really have to, with anything, when you figure out a daily task, well, who does it impact? And are there things that you can come up with that help the most people? That's when all of a sudden the commercial side emerges better, right? Because there's just more people who might have that issue. And when you then look at it that way, it's like, okay, it doesn't matter why somebody would need a particular thing. When I look at myself, I have a congenital heart valve issue. And I had surgery to fix an aortic aneurysm, but I left the valve in. And one of the reasons I left the valve in was because it was functioning okay. It might fail later on. But my cardiologist said, you have a certain valve issue, but valve issues are caused by numerous things. They can calcify. There's just like, there's literally, I think a double-digit number of issues that can cause a need for a valve replacement. It doesn't matter why you need the valve replaced, because they're all going to be the same replacement valve. But
Right.
my cardiologist said your issue is in an area where there's a ton of development, because it impacts so many people, that the likelihood is when your valve actually goes bad, there will be much better options for you, so you might as well wait. Well, that logic, if you think of it, it's the same logic in some ways as the NULU or a lot of other things. When people look and go, okay, it wouldn't matter, let's say, for sight impairment is a great example. It doesn't matter how you lose your sight. It could be congenital. It could be an accident. It could be macular degeneration. I had a suspected TIA the other day. It ended up being like an ocular stroke, where like either a blood clot or something got behind my eye. It was kind of a fluky thing, but I lost vision in my left eye. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of ways you can lose your vision. Well, designing for the vision impaired community, that would make sense then, because you have like this Venn diagram of all the ways that people can lose their sight, and it doesn't have to be 100% sight loss, where there's a similar array of tasks that they would need to do regardless of how they got there. That development would be beneficial, profitable, and viable. And I just don't think people think that way.
No, and and I feel like we're at the beginning of a new way of approaching disability, to the point we may even have new words for it a few years from now. And that is, I have a friend, Missy Sue Mastel, who likes to focus on people being differently able, because she's realized that at any point in our life we can all have the effects of being disabled. And you've talked about the disability curve, which is a similar concept, and also, a lot of things that would result in the experience of being disabled come with aging. So taking this task-based approach that you're using, where you're focusing more on the function and a lot less on the person, is something I feel it at least it feels to me very positive, more affirming, less divisive than trying to figure out whether we're disabled or not disabled, or whether somebody who has macular degeneration is blind or visually impaired or not. So
right. Well, and the beauty of it is if you're in our world, and my team's world is unique in that we really want to provide simple tools, right? I had a friend who has MS, and he used the phrase, and I used it earlier, the huge impact of simple improvements, and I butchered it, I'm sure. But if we start there, and when you're talking about the confluence of people with vision impairment, or the confluence of people with grip issues or whatever, then you look and you say, okay, well, with the easiest tasks, the things that have the most impact, we should already be there, right? We should already be at a point where we can look and say, we should be developing this way, because there is that immense impact on so many different people. And what that creates is what's cool. I love it when you talk about the stone. My favorite song, one of them, is "Ripple" by Grateful Dead. I put it on I told my kids it's on my funeral playlist.
okay,
It's a good song, but it's right. It's like this ripple, where what we're hoping is, so now we're partnering or looking at partnering with a guy who's got an adaptive cutting board, who was developing stuff for the same reason. He's like, holy crap, you guys are doing some cool things. We're actively working on some improvements with the handle design, where you would, for somebody with grip issues, who literally can't grip, where you can secure the knife to your hand, and have a solid connection, but because you don't have to grip the knife, it's still usable.
I see.
And that's
Kind of
what
like, yeah,
one of the things we're working on now is a storage solution for people who are in a wheelchair, that actually came from a design that I was working on after my shoulder surgery, and we learned some lessons about configurable storage, where things are where you need them based on your body and stuff like that. But it's funny, and I didn't even think of this until we're talking now, is configurable storage is also something that I would guess in the vision impaired community is something, because I remember when I was in the Army, you'd pack your rucksack, and most of the time you're unpacking it in the dark. You got to know where everything is. You're functionally blind, right? You can't
Yes.
turn your light on or you'll get shot. So as far, my eyes worked fine when I was out in the field, but I couldn't see. Guess what? Same problem statement is put everything where you know it is, have it to some sense tactile so that you know what you're grabbing, and then you don't spend an hour reaching through your rucksack for what you're looking for. So I think the simplicity of what we're trying to do is the strength, because the simplicity, when you boil it down to that essence, means it's applicable to more people. And then when the ripples happen, the improvements to the core product can be more bespoke to a certain group. And I kind of pulled that word bespoke out of the air, but I like it because it's not designed for a weakness or a problem or something like that. It's way more about just deliberate design. And frankly, the other thing we want to do as a side note is make the stuff designed for the disabled community cool, right? Like it never, like one of the things we hear from people is they're like, God, that's a cool looking knife. And sometimes the stuff that's designed for the disabled community looks so clinical. And so like it looks like a torture device instead of being something someone would want to use. And that's another thing that can jump the
Yes. When it comes to adaptive technology, there is a severe lack of fun and style and coolness invested in a lot of our products.
Totally. And it's interesting because you do see weird times when adaptive or however you want to label it, but like I'm a firearms enthusiast. I like to shoot. I can still use a gun, but I've had to change some of the ones I use just because of my grip strength. But now they make braces for people who can't. And you look and you say, someone got smart and said, there's a lot of people who like to shoot guns who now can't. And so I'm going to develop something adaptive. But you never hear, hey, this is an adaptive grip, right? You hear
because then hunters and shooters wouldn't use them.
That's exactly right. So what's super funny, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, is there's sort of an identity aspect of this whole discussion, where instead of people saying, yeah, I'm disabled, and like in my case, most of mine is wear and tear. Well, I should wear that proudly. I've had a pretty full life for 54, and now I'm reaping the some of the benefits and some of the consequences. Right. And both of them are coming together in the case of NULU. But anybody who's like, and it is actually interesting how people be like, oh, I had both shoulders done, I had my knees done, or whatever. Those people will still not call themselves disabled. Many times the surgery works, but it's just it's a very weird third rail for a lot of people.
Yes, it is. There's a lot of emotional baggage tied into accepting or identifying that you have a disability, which is why this idea of approaching access from the point of view of a task-based approach and thinking of the disability or the ability curve are important concepts that are kind of like our the knife is kind of what got us together, but it's allowed us to talk about some very important concepts. So I think we're about at the end of the time of our conversation. So I'd like you to finish by doing three things for me, if this is okay. One, I'd like you to tell people, remind people what your organization is trying to do as far as helping other inventors who want to focus on an ability problem. Two, what you need to grow that program. And three, what would you want people to remember from today's conversation about disability and accessibility?
Okay, the first one was our mission, right?
Yes, sir.
And hopefully it's become pretty apparent to everybody on the calls. Ours is to increase accessibility for everybody and make better adaptable products. In the time we're in, there should be no excuse for not creating a world where everybody can thrive and meet their potential. And it's not a big lift. It's a pretty simple thing. So what we want to do is continue to do that in the adaptive space, especially now that we figured it out, because it's a fun place to be. And the second one is the way people can help me.
Yes, sir.
The best way is awareness. We are looking for more folks like you all the time who can spread the gospel about adaptive design. The challenge with a lot of adaptive products is that they're tactile and they're difficult to understand for people who have not either temporarily or permanently dealt with some type of disability. Well, that does create a challenge sometimes in translation. So anybody out there who can help us out with awareness and introductions to anybody who might help us in that effort to increase that accessibility, it would be great, because here's the thing, we're all in it together, and money will flow to where there is profitability, and especially on impactful things, there will be those either through family offices where there's a good degree of wealth, or other places that people connect to this cause, that there can be investment. And the more people understand what we're talking about, because we both understand it, the better it is for everybody, because then there's capital that will flow into developing these businesses and growing them and all that. And the last one was the reminder or anybody who wants to.
The last one is, what would you want people to take away from today about the subject of accessibility and disability?
That again, we're all in it together, and that we really not need to start thinking about, especially in adaptability, what connects us all. Because of that ability curve, we're all on it. And for anybody who's sitting here guffawing what you and I are talking about, they're one car accident, one fall, one stroke away from wanting to join us. And I think people have to think that way, to not just empathize, but to identify with where they're headed, right? Because again, we're all going to be there. There's the very unique people that don't have any issues as they get older. It is unique. But also, if there are folks out there listening, any of your listeners who I can help, let me know. My success with this has been unique in my career, in that it didn't feel like it's work, but it doesn't feel like it the same way. And I think it's because for the first time since my military time, especially, I've allowed success to occur in the agency of others in a way that I haven't in the past. And when I do that and let go and decide to let other people help me, that's when I build a great team. It's where I meet people like you. It's where all of a sudden, you know, my ongoing joke is that I'm somewhere between Oppenheimer and Forrest Gump, in that I can find the people who are super helpful and the people who can help me bring a project together. But when I let it happen organically, it's better, because I find the people who connect with the project and all that. And if I can do that for anybody out there, I would love to help out in any way.
I appreciate it. You know, you're speaking to my heart on that last part there, because over the years I have talked about interdependence, or the willingness to, the freedom to ask for help or opportunities and accept them when offered. And it's just wonderful as part of this Accessibility Advantage interview to have a guest talk about how his success really started to take off as he's allowed other people to come into his journey, his life, and to help him accomplish this goal. That is just, that's music to my ears.
It's interesting, and it's a vulnerability, right? It's a vulnerability to ask for help, and I think a lot of people look and they say that is weakness. But I went through a real Zen phase at one point in my life, and part of Zen is ego death. And not asking for help is ego. It's an ego. It's either shame about, maybe an addiction or something, right? That help, or it's ego to say, I can do it myself. I'm in control, all that. And you may very well be, but it's amazing how conversations and interactions change when you ask for help. Because if someone won't give it to you, they should be gone in the first place, unless they're doing it for some reason they really want to help you. The people who want to help you and give help and who ask for help themselves, those are the people that will be transformative in your life. And I think it took me a long time to figure it out. But when I got rid of the ego and I said, the best way to, and this is a great way to end this, is my partner, my original partner, the design guy, as I was building the team, his name is Gordon. He the other day said, do you have a problem with me representing myself as a co-inventor? And my answer was, you are. So what's the question? And that for me represented sort of a master's degree for me in being able to say that I can let go of all this, and I can make it about the project and the success of the project, and not about me. And I think the more that your listeners or anybody can look and say, I've got a great idea that can help people. One, especially in the adaptive space, and I hope I'm not going over.
We're going over, but we don't worry about it. So just
the optics of stealing an idea from a disabled entrepreneur are really, really bad. So yes, you get a patent and all that kind of stuff, but there are some moats and defensive things that can be created around a business that is that you can protect it. So there's a lot of reasons why our community, and I'll say our community because I'm a disabled vet, should be looking at more asking for help. How did you do it? I have a great idea. Let me help me figure this out. And the thing I love about this community is, like what I was saying before, they will ask for help in the context of help me do it, don't do it for me.
Right. And I look forward to meeting some more of the veterans in your community and seeing how I can help them share their visions, their products, their stories. I actually love helping other people start their own podcasts. So we'll see how we can help each other with our various communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So y'all, I've been talking with Douglas Katz, and he's the inventor of the NULU knife. He's also a West Point graduate, disabled veteran, and a lifelong athlete, something I've never been and never will be. And his entrepreneur career has focused on resilience, innovation, and a commitment to improving independence through better tools. So I hope y'all will check out the website I've been mentioning, tinyurl.com/NULU-the blind blogger. I'll also have his LinkedIn profile and his other social media stuff so y'all can reach out to Douglas directly and start building even more connections to see how many more people we can help, either those who have products that they want to refine and bring to market, or getting the word out to the people who don't yet need or know that they need products that started off their lives as being made for somebody with a disability. And of course, I'm the blind blogger Max Ivy. My website is theaccessibilityadvantage.com, and Maxwell at theaccessibilityadvantage.com is my email address. Douglas, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I've enjoyed this a lot, and look forward to seeing how we can continue to support each other and each other's
Avatar and 3
communities.
more items. Dialogue. Avatar. Group. You are currently on an unlabeled.
Well, I hope I didn't just lose him.
No, I'm here.
You're there? Okay. You never know when your computer starts talking as a blind
Oh,
person.
dude. Yeah, no, listen, I've been dealing with tech issues.
All right, so let's just finish this thing. We'll just finish this thing. So here's my closing song, y'all. Disabled people, we tell our friends and share to our social sites. Don't think about how hard it is. Just focus on those dollar signs. 'Cause accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities. Makes the world better for everyone, online as well as in person.
Item chooser menu. The 2 items end stream. But we're having troubles. End stream. End stream button. End the stream. And outro. Set outro. Not end stream button. End stream button.